All right, but let's speak now to Professor John Stremlau, who's Honorary Professor of International Relations at Wits University. Prof, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. The news hits you here yesterday that President Joe Biden is stepping away from the presidential race. What was your initial reaction? Is it the right thing for him to have done? Could he have done it earlier?
Well, I think it was the right thing for him to do, and he did it very graciously. And it is a most timely reminder that for the sake of fostering trust in institutions and due process and the Constitution, that politicians make it plain that it's just not about them. And it's rich that Donald Trump which is all about him, is an autocrat in the making, and he's condemning the Biden presidency, where I think the Biden presidency was very successful, but he was old and failing in health, and he did a terrible presentation in the debate with Trump, allowing Trump to lie repeatedly, and so I just think in a sense. Joe Biden was emulating Nelson Mandela.
It's Joe Biden emulating Nelson Mandela. Very interesting take there. Let's talk a little bit about the campaigns, though, and whether or not you feel that Joe Biden, having stayed on in this presidential race up until now, has in any way hurt the campaign for the Democrats, and what work you think someone like Kamala Harris, if she were to succeed, in fact, as the candidate to taking the party forward, is the right person. But damage done to the Democrats' campaign, and who's the right person to take the Democrats forward in this election?
Well, it shouldn't be for me to pronounce on who the right person is, but it's the process that really matters. And this is unprecedented, and it is very human. And for Joe Biden to have invested 50 years aspiring to an office, and then to show that he really did admire and respect the Constitution and the due process is stunning, and to the credit of the U.S. flawed democracy that is constantly being updated. And I think Kamala Harris would be a wonderful successor, and she would appeal to a next generation. She's 60 years old, which is right in the formidable role that she could play age-wise. And she is a woman, and she's a person of color. And it would suggest that America is becoming more diverse and united in its diversity.
I want to stick with the issue of timing for a little bit, Prof, because you'd of course note that just over a week ago, the conversation we were having about the run-up to the elections was the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and that having gathered global attention. And then there's the view that might have actually done Trump some good in gaining some favor with the electorate in the U.S. And I wonder if you think that would be true, and if Joe Biden stepping down is perhaps a response to that event that we saw last week.
Well, the historians will argue over this, but Trump, I'm glad he was not killed, and I'm glad for his family, and I'm glad for him as a person, as a fellow human being. But he is a bad politician who would be bad for Africa, bad for the United States, bad for international cooperation, and he's very self-centered, and it's all about him. And this is a moment to reflect on how difficult it is to maintain a democracy. And certainly South Africans in their practice now of a government of national unity are going to be challenged. But I admire President Ramaphosa's respect for the Constitution and his emphasis on that document. We are all in the service. No man is above the law, and we're all in the service of due process and rule of law.
Yeah, I think before we start to get into what I suppose what this election in the US would mean for South Africa and certainly Africa, which you've started to touch on, and we'll get into that in a moment. But there is, of course, the issue of the divisiveness that one does see in the US, particularly where race relations is concerned. And there is the question that, a lot of people are asking themselves whether or not Americans are ready for a woman president, and certainly a woman of color.
Well, we'll see. I never thought I'd live to see a black family in the White House, and I did with the Obamas. And so I feel that America is very slowly moving forward, and it gets set back by, the country has been severely divided as long as South Africa was under white minority illiberal nationalist rule. And, the fact that white Christian males felt themselves superior to all other people living in South Africa. The same thing has occurred in the American South and to an extent throughout the United States, and it's changing. And there are today 59 million immigrants from Africa in the United States, making a huge contribution to the country's well-being and growth and development, and this is being increasingly recognized. And so, I'm very, very critical of J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate on the Trump side. He's very young and he's inexperienced, but he is married to a person of color of Indian descent, and that's to his credit. But he's not ready for prime time by any means, and neither is Donald Trump. And the Americans have got to put this Republican Party to bed, and hopefully that there will arise a new two-party system. But it's very problematic, and we'll have to see. November 5th is a long way away.
All right, well, let's talk about the impact for us as South Africans, right? We know that at the moment, the Minister for Trade, Industry and Competition, Parks Tau, has departed for the US. This is, of course, to lead our delegation in the AGOA Forum. And the question then becomes, as US really starts to look at its own internal politics and certainly who leads it, what the conversation you feel would look like for relations with the US when you've got this bill requiring the administration to review US and South Africa relations. Biggest concerns where that is concerned? Well,
so long as the Democrats stay in power, I don't think South Africa has anything to fear from the 56% of exports to the United States that are duty-free come from South Africa under AGOA, and South Africa is a fledgling democracy, and there's a lot of solidarity now, even though the history of U.S. South African relations is pretty bad. Because of the apartheid regime and the solidarity with white racists in the States, but it's changing, and Donald Trump would be very bad for AGOA, even if it's signed and renewed, because he would put restrictions on trade and override with executive authority, override the AGOA privileges. So I think that South Africa does have a stake in the outcome of the American election. And I think Parks Tau is going to the U.S. is a very good sign and symptomatic of the kind of working relationship that the AGOA Forum had back in here in 2023, at the end of 2023, when the U.S. Special Trade Representative and the Minister of Trade and Industry got along just fine. And I think I'm reasonably optimistic and hopeful about improvements in U.S. South African cooperation that's respectful of both sides.
Okay, I'm gonna give you one last question here, and I think that this is a really great way for us to wrap it up. I mean, 2024 certainly, and Eldred and I made the point earlier about what a year for democracies in some of the, I suppose, the bigger democracies on the globe, right? Big changes here in South Africa, massive changes in the UK, for instance, and certainly the run-up to this election in November, an important one for the US, a country that is, I suppose, seen itself for the most part as exemplary and that North Star where democracy is concerned. Do you believe that the US still holds that position of an exemplary democracy in this era?
I don't think it's ever been a democracy that's exemplary, but it's always improvable. And so long as you keep a democratic system, it's never perfect, but it can always be perfected. And I say the same thing about the South Africans. We've had our own ups and downs in the last 30 years. And Cyril Ramaphosa and the Government of National Unity and the ANC is trying very much to rectify that and get out the bad apples and get people to apply themselves as civic responsible voters. And I praise you for effort at informing the public as you're doing.
Yeah, Prof, an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us.